We are grateful to you for letting us be in worship with you on this Sunday morning. And I invite your attention, it is in the Gospel of John, chapter 21. Jesus has been raised from the dead, and those who knew him and followed him were not sure what all that is going to mean at this point. So with a certain degree of uncertainty, they knew that Jesus had been raised from the dead and had met with them, but they were unsure about the future. John chapter 21. Afterward then, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. And it happened in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. "I'm going out to fish," Simon Peter said. He told them, and then they said to him, "Well, we'll go with you." So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they did not catch anything. With their history as being fisher people, but not being able to bring in a catch of anything. Then early in the morning, after the all-nighter, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize at first that it was Jesus himself. He called out to them and said, "Friends," on the shore he was calling to them in the boat, "have you caught any fish?" "No," they answered honestly. "No." And he said, "Well, throw your net then on the other side of the boat, and you will find some." And they're probably thinking, what did he know? Who does he think he is? Don't we know better how to do this? When they did, they were unable then to haul the net in because of the large number of fish to which they caught. Smarts had caught up with them, and they decided, what we've been trying has not been working. Let's go for it. Then the disciple then whom Jesus loved, that would be John himself, the author of the Gospel of John as we know it today. He referred to himself as the one Jesus loved, as the beloved. And then said to Peter, "Well, it is the Lord." And as soon then as Simon Peter heard him, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garments then around himself, jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net then that was full of fish, and they were not far from the shore, about 100 yards. And when they landed, they saw a fire already burning there, with embers, coals, there with fish upon it, and some bread. Interesting that Jesus provided already ahead of time exactly what they needed. And so then he said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you just caught." So Simon Peter climbed in back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. Don't know how he did that, except maybe trying to prove his worth again somehow. He said, "I can do this. I can get this done." It was full of a large fish, and it actually gives the number, 153. But even so then, with so many then, but the net was not torn. Then Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples then dared to ask him, "Lord, who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. And they had the sense that this was going to be a divine encounter. An encounter with the resurrected Christ that was somehow going to have meaning beyond what they could ever ask or know about or think. Jesus came then and he took some of the bread and gave it to them, and the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. And when they had finished eating, then Jesus said to Simon Peter, remember where Simon Peter had been? He had said to Jesus, "I'll follow you wherever you go. I'll be there for you." He had taken the sword during the night of the betrayal and had tried to cut off one of the ears of one of the guards. He had said as he was asked in the courtyard the next morning, are you one of the ones who was with Jesus? And he said, I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know him. I don't know him. No, I do not belong to him. And so probably with a sense of shame and a sense of foreboding and a sense of wonderment and a sense of fear and also a sense of guilt, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, do you love me more than these? Didn't berate him, didn't say, I told you so. He didn't ask, why in the world did you do that? Quote, let me down. But his question was simply to Simon Peter, the priority, Simon Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. And Jesus said then, feed my lambs. You're not done. Your life is not over. The effectiveness that you have to give and to be with people and with the community of faith and with those who are outside of the faith. Your ability to do that, so you have mission to be accomplished. And you have still much work to be done for me. And so then go and feed my lambs. And so it was that Peter was called to be the first pastor of the church in Jerusalem. And Jesus then again said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And then Jesus said, well, take care then of my sheep. The third time he said to him, and Simon Peter was beginning to wonder, Jesus, have you not heard what I'm trying to say to you? That in fact, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he was hurt, Peter was, because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? Lord, you know all things, and you know that I love you. Then feed my sheep, Jesus said unto him. So it is a day of new beginnings, a day of an encounter with the risen Christ that has changed his life and theirs forever. Hear the story with me in a few other words. 6 of the men have gone fishing. We can see them out there laboring all night, lights blazing, 2 boats coordinating the nets, all after all nothing. Not a single fish to sell or cook for their own breakfast. Their utterly destitution on the water that night is a mirror image of their souls. They have nothing to show for their labor during that night. They catch nothing. They could not even catch a minnow on their own, actually. Whatever skills they thought they had were not enough. And then they remembered the other night when this happened 3 years earlier when it all started. They all think of it, but no one speaks. What's the point? But just before morning breaks, and as we were there just before they give up, a man calls to them from the shore. Who is it? Can it be? Hesitantly, no, they do what he says. They did drop the nets to the other side, and in one impossible moment, their nets were full of the biggest fish they'd ever seen. Don't they know this pattern? A man speaks and out of his abundance, out of nothing, that is out of the sense of nothingness and failure explodes this crazy, unending abundance. How does that happen? Out of a sense of desperation, there comes an answer. Out of a sense of wondering and feeling lost, and begins to be generated an answer that begins to speak to them. And Peter sees him clearly now. He sees the one on the shore, and he knows it's the person of Jesus himself. So he throws on his clothes and leaps into the sea, and this time he thrashes toward the Lord instead of begging him to leave and to get out of his life. All the men now then are gathered around the fire. It crackles with a homey warmth on the sand. Food is nearly gone. The fire settles, a plume of smoke follows the wind and hovers over one cluster of men and another. Then Jesus speaks. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Peter startles. Jesus, sitting on the other side of the embers, looks straight at him, and his face is quiet and kind. Simon Peter looks around to see what Jesus means. He looks at the sea, the boats, his best friends, the fish on the sand waiting to be sold. He blinks, dazed. What is he asking? Do you love me more than these? And now he knows the truth. None of this is his. None of this can feed him. Then he looks back. Yes, Lord, you know that I do love you. Peter stammers. It's the first time he's spoken to the Master since that night of his recanting, I do not know him. Peter stammers, and this is the first word he's spoken. Jesus blinks and smiles at him and tilts his head and asks again, do you love me? Peter freezes. Jesus isn't asking, will you ever turn from me again? Will you ever make a mistake again? His question for me as well and for you as we're there in the midst of that was because I too was there and so were you there that night. Do you love me? But he asks already knowing the answer. He knows Peter's mind and heart already. He knows my heart also, but Peter, distrusting himself, does not know it until it bursts forth from him. Lord, you know that I love you. And in saying it, Peter knows he does love this now risen Jesus, even enough to die for him now, and he will. Simon will die for the name and for the sake of Jesus years later. Jesus tells him how he will die in a few words. But Simon, son of John, do you love me? He asks quietly in a low voice, with unwavering eyes. Peter flinches. Why doesn't Jesus believe me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He shouts it this time. And just as he speaks, he hears it in himself. And I hear it, and you hear it. The three questions, the three answers. Is it possible? Is it possible that this very denial is now forgiven, covered by love? By Jesus' love for him, and incredibly, his own love for Jesus. His own small, limited human love. Our love isn't enough then. Peter would never forget this exchange. He would go on to write to the early church and to all believers afterwards. Above all, love one another, he said, as we know it in a scripture later on, because love covers a multitude of sins. So this then for you and me, and for Peter and for those gathered there that night, this is the gospel. This is the gospel right here, in these words around this fire. Peter is forgiven of his faithlessness, his selfishness. Peter is forgiven of his fear. And so are you, and so am I. I am as well, and every one of us who's ever run away from the one who is our very life. Because this is then the truth of following. That when he said, come after me, it also meant that he in fact would continue to come after us. We have nothing to offer him. We stumble, we faint, we run the other way, and still he comes after us. He wants us and he loves us. He does not let us go. But Jesus is not done. And this is not just about us. Every declaration of Peter's love then is met with a charge. Feed my lambs and feed my sheep. Take care of my sheep. So Peter's love is enough. And this love has work to do out in the world. Into those relationships that at times we find difficult. Even to people whom we are not ordinarily drawn to And as we have been fed, as we've been forgiven, we then are able to feed others where? Everywhere he commands us to actually go out into all of the world.
Yeah.
And can this be? I want to protest. I want to say back to Jesus, you know how weak we are, how wavering our faith, how limited our love. Are you really trusting us? How can we do this? And I know that the answer has already been given through the fish, through the wine at the wedding, through the bread on the hillside. He is the God who takes whatever we bring to him. Our sense of failure, our destitution, our tiny faith, our too small fish, our very human love, and he multiplies it beyond measure. God will make our love enough as he enables us by the power of his Holy Spirit.